There is one thing, and only one thing, that consistently gets past the defenses of even the most guarded, avoidant man. It is not jealousy. It is not chasing him harder. It is not playing games or disappearing for weeks at a time, hoping he'll come running. It is something so simple that most people overlook it completely. And yet when it happens, something inside an avoidant man genuinely shifts. Something he can't quite explain to himself, let alone to you. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly what that one thing is, why it works on a psychological level almost nothing else does, and how to do it without losing yourself in the process. Before I tell you what it is, I need you to understand why almost everything you've probably already tried hasn't worked. Because if you've been trying to reach an avoidant man, chances are you've tried being more affectionate, hoping warmth would melt the distance. You've tried giving him space, hoping absence would make him miss you. You've tried having the big conversation, laying everything out, telling him exactly how you feel and what you need, hoping honesty would finally break through. And maybe some of that helped a little for a moment before things went right back to where they started. That's not because you did anything wrong. It's because none of those approaches address the actual mechanism running underneath an avoidant man's behavior. They're all outward strategies aimed at an inward problem. And inward problems don't respond to outward pressure. They respond to something else entirely. Here, quote S, what almost nobody explains properly about avoidant men. Their walls were not built to keep love out. That's the part everyone gets backwards. Their walls were built to keep a very specific kind of exposure out. The exposure of being truly seen, truly known, truly needed in a way that puts their sense of control at risk. Somewhere in their history, often early, sometimes so early they don't even consciously remember it, being close to someone came with a cost. Maybe it was inconsistency, love that showed up warm one day and cold the next, teaching a young nervous system that closeness could never be trusted to stay predictable. Maybe it was a household where showing need got you dismissed or mocked, where crying meant weakness, where asking for comfort taught you that comfort wasn't reliably there. Maybe it was watching the adults around him treat vulnerability as something dangerous, something to hide, something that got used against you the moment you revealed it. Whatever the specific origin, the lesson landed the same way it always does. Needing someone is risky. Being fully known is risky. The safest position is the one where you need nothing and nobody can catch you off guard. So he built a wall, not out of coldness, but out of self-preservation. And that wall has been running his relationships ever since, long before you ever showed up. Now, here's the part that matters most for what we're about to talk about. That wall isn't actually afraid of love. It's afraid of pressure. It's afraid of being pushed, pursued, cornered, or made to feel like he has to perform in order to be accepted. Every strategy that involves trying harder, being more available, proving your worth through effort, actually reinforces the very thing his nervous system is scanning for as dangerous. It feels to him like being closed in on, like being asked to give more than he currently has access to give. And the more pressure he senses, even loving, well-intentioned pressure, the harder that wall works to hold its position. So what actually gets through? What is the one thing that consistently makes an avoidant man's guard come down instead of go up? It is being fully accepted exactly as he is, in the moment he is struggling, without being asked to change, explain, or perform his way back into your good graces. I want you to sit with that for a second, because it sounds almost too simple, and I promise you it is not simple to actually do. What I'm describing is not passive tolerance. It's not letting him treat you badly and calling it acceptance. It's something much more specific and much more powerful. It's the experience for him of pulling away, going quiet, retreating into himself the way he always has. And instead of meeting that retreat with panic, pursuit, punishment, or a demand that he explain himself immediately, he encounters someone who remains calm, warm, and unthreatened by his need for space. Someone who doesn't chase him into the corner he retreated to. Someone who doesn't interrogate the retreat the second he resurfaces. Someone whose warmth toward him doesn't disappear or turn cold in response to his own coldness. This is rare. This is genuinely, statistically rare, because most people, understandably, respond to an avoidant partner's withdrawal with some version of anxiety. They chase. They ask what's wrong repeatedly. They send another message when the first one doesn't get answered. They escalate, not because they're doing anything wrong as human beings. Their nervous system is simply responding normally to the fear of losing connection, but because that escalation is exactly what confirms in an avoidant man's mind that closeness equals pressure, and pressure equals danger. When you don't do that, when you can let him retreat and stay steady yourself, without collapsing into anxious pursuit and without going cold and punishing in response, something happens inside him that he has almost never experienced before. His nervous system, which has spent years bracing for either abandonment or suffocation every time he pulls back, doesn't get either. It gets stillness, it gets safety. And safety, to a nervous system that has never trusted it, is disarming in a way that nothing else comes close to. Let me walk you through exactly why this works on a deeper level, because understanding the mechanism is what's going to help you actually do this authentically, instead of turning it into another performance. Avoidant men, underneath the composed exterior, are often running a very old fear that sounds something like this. If I let you fully in, you'll eventually use that access against me, whether through leaving, through disappointment, through control, or through needing more from me than I know how to give. This fear isn't usually conscious. It doesn't announce itself in clear language. It shows up instead as an urge to create distance the moment things start to feel too close, too real, too important. And every time someone in his life has responded to that urge with panic or punishment, it has confirmed the original fear. See, I told you closeness leads to chaos. I told you this was dangerous. But when someone responds to that same urge with calm acceptance, when his retreat is met not with abandonment and not with suffocation, but with simple, steady presence that says, I'm still here, take the space you need, I'm not going anywhere, and I'm also not going to chase you, something in that old story starts to wobble. It doesn't collapse instantly. Deep patterns rarely collapse in a single moment, but a crack forms. And through that crack, for the first time in a long time, he gets a small, direct experience of something his nervous system has never fully believed was possible, that he can need space without losing the relationship, and that he can be imperfect, inconsistent, sometimes distant, without being punished or abandoned for it. This is what actually melts an avoidant man. Not chasing, not disappearing strategically to manipulate a reaction, not big romantic gestures designed to prove your feelings. Simple, unwavering acceptance of him, exactly as he currently is, delivered without anxiety, without resentment, and without an agenda attached to changing him. Now, I need to be very careful here, because this is exactly the point where people take good advice and twist it into something that hurts them. Accepting him as he is does not mean tolerating disrespect. It does not mean accepting behavior that genuinely crosses a line, dishonesty, cruelty, chronic unavailability that leaves you starved and alone in the relationship. What I'm describing is not a blank check for him to treat you however he wants while you smile and absorb it. What I'm describing is much more targeted than that. It's specifically about how you respond to his need for space, his moments of emotional retreat, his difficulty expressing feelings in the moment. It's about not treating his attachment style itself as a character flaw that needs correcting through pressure. There is a very important difference between accepting someone's attachment wound and accepting mistreatment, and I want you to hold both of those truths at the same time as we go through the rest of this. So let's talk about what this actually looks like in real practical terms, because understanding the psychology is only useful if you know how to translate it into your actual life with this actual man. The first shift is in how you respond when he goes quiet. Most people's instinct when an avoidant man goes quiet is to immediately wonder what they did wrong and start trying to fix it. Did I say something? Should I text him again? Is he mad at me? This spiral, completely understandable as it is, usually results in either a flurry of messages that push him further into his shell, or a cold, punishing silence in return that confirms his fear that closeness always leads to conflict. Instead, what actually works is letting the silence exist without treating it as an emergency. This doesn't mean pretending you don't notice or don't care. It means responding internally with something closer to, he needs some space right now. And that's allowed to be true without it meaning something is wrong with us. This internal shift changes everything about your external behavior. You stop sending the third check-in message. You stop rehearsing what you did wrong. You simply let the space exist, and you go on living your own life. In the meantime, meantime, genuinely, not performatively. The second shift is in how you respond when he does come back around, because this moment matters more than almost anything else in the entire dynamic. If he pulls away and then resurfaces, whether that's after an hour, a day, or longer, and he's met with visible relief so intense it borders on interrogation, "Where were you? Why did you go quiet? I was so worried. What's going on with you?" That response, however understandable, teaches him that reconnecting comes with a price. It teaches him that his withdrawal has consequences he'll have to answer for every single time. Instead, what actually works is warmth without cross-examination, a simple, genuine gladness that he's back, without demanding an explanation for where he went. This doesn't mean you can never ask questions or that you're not allowed to want to understand his patterns over time, in a calm conversation at the right moment. It means the moment of reconnection itself isn't turned into a trial. You let him come back into warmth, not into an interrogation room. The third shift is in how you handle your own need for reassurance, because this is often the hardest part, and I want to be honest with you about that, instead of pretending it's easy. Wanting reassurance from someone you love is completely normal and healthy. The challenge with an avoidant man is that demanding it in the moment he's already feeling overwhelmed usually backfires, triggering more retreat rather than the closeness you're actually looking for. So instead of asking for reassurance during his low moments, the more effective approach is building your own internal stability so you're not relying on his consistency in order to feel secure. This is genuinely one of the hardest things to develop, and I'm not going to pretend it happens overnight. It usually requires having a life, friendships, purpose, and interests that exist fully outside the relationship, so that his ups and downs don't become the only measure of whether your day was good or bad. When you have that internal stability, your calm around his retreats stops being a performance you're forcing yourself into and starts being a genuine reflection of the fact that your entire emotional world doesn't hinge on his mood. The fourth shift, and this one surprises a lot of people, is learning to express your own needs clearly, calmly, and without shame, rather than either suppressing them entirely or expressing them through anxiety and escalation. A lot of people, once they learn about avoidant attachment, swing too far in the other direction. They become so afraid of triggering his retreat that they stop expressing any needs at all, shrinking themselves down to nothing in an attempt to seem low maintenance and easy to be around. This doesn't actually help. It usually just leads to quiet resentment building on your end, which eventually leaks out in ways that are far more damaging than a clear, calm request would have been. What actually works is saying things plainly and without drama. "I miss you" when we go a few days without talking, said simply, without an edge to it, lands very differently than the same feeling expressed through 3 days of cold silence followed by an explosion. Clear, calm honesty, delivered without an agenda to control his response, is something avoidant men often respond to far better than people expect, precisely because it doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like information offered freely that he's allowed to receive or not receive without being punished either way. Now, let's talk about why all of this actually creates the melting effect I mentioned at the beginning, because I want you to understand the deeper mechanism, not just the surface behaviors. Avoidant men have spent years, sometimes an entire lifetime, waiting for the other shoe to drop in any relationship that starts to matter. They've learned, through whatever experiences shape them, that people either eventually demand more than they can give, leading to conflict and eventual loss, or that people eventually give up and leave when the avoidant person doesn't perform closeness the way they're expected to. Both outcomes confirm the same underlying belief, that being fully known and fully accepted, flaws, retreats, imperfections, and all, simply isn't possible. It's a belief that gets reinforced over and over, relationship after relationship, until it starts to feel less like a belief and more like an unshakable fact about how the world works. When you consistently show him something different, when your acceptance of his need for space doesn't waver, when your warmth toward him doesn't disappear the moment he's difficult to reach, when you can hold your own needs clearly without turning them into weapons or ultimatums, you are offering him direct, repeated evidence against a belief system that has run unchallenged for most of his life. And here's the thing about beliefs like that. They don't change because someone argues with them. They don't change because someone explains logically why the belief is wrong. They change through repeated, lived experience that contradicts them. Every time he pulls away and you remain steady instead of either panicking or punishing, that's one more piece of evidence. Every time he comes back and is met with warmth instead of interrogation, that's another piece. Over time, these small moments accumulate into something significant, a slow, cumulative rewiring of what he actually believes is possible in a relationship. This is why it doesn't happen instantly. And I want to be honest with you about that because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve a fantasy. This isn't a technique you do once and watch him transform overnight. It's a pattern you maintain consistently over weeks and months, sometimes longer, that slowly builds a different kind of trust than anything he's experienced before. And I also want to be honest about something else. This approach isn't a guarantee. Some avoidant men, even when met with exactly this kind of consistent, calm acceptance, still won't move toward real intimacy because their patterns run deeper than any one relationship can heal, or because they simply aren't ready to do the internal work required to meet you halfway, regardless of how safe you make the space around them. I'm not telling you this to discourage you. I'm telling you because I think it matters more than anything else. I could say today that you understand this isn't about becoming so perfectly calm and accepting that you can single-handedly heal someone else's attachment wound through sheer patience alone. That's not how healing works, and believing it is how people end up years deep in relationships that never actually change, quietly sacrificing their own needs in the hope that consistency will eventually be enough. So let's talk about the other side of this, the side that has to exist alongside everything I've just described in order for any of it to actually be healthy, rather than a slow erosion of your own well-being. Acceptance without boundaries isn't acceptance. It's abandonment of yourself disguised as patience. If you've ever confused patience with losing yourself in a relationship like this, type the word learning in the comments below. I read every single one, and it helps me know what to break down for you next. The version of this that actually works, the version that actually creates the safety an avoidant man needs in order to soften over time, requires you to be just as clear about what you need as you are calm about what he needs. This means being able to say, clearly and without cruelty, when something genuinely isn't working for you. It means being willing to walk away from a dynamic that stays permanently one-sided, no matter how much compassion you have for the wound underneath his behavior. It means understanding that giving someone space to be imperfect is not the same thing as giving someone permission to be consistently unavailable, dishonest, or emotionally absent indefinitely, while you wait for a change that may never come. The women and men who actually succeed in creating this kind of transformative safety for an avoidant partner are not the ones who suppress their own needs entirely in service of never triggering a retreat. They're the ones who have done enough of their own internal work to know the difference between giving someone room to struggle and giving someone a permanent excuse to never show up. They hold both compassion and standards simultaneously, without treating those two things as if they're in conflict with each other. This is what actually creates the safety that allows an avoidant person to soften, not the absence of standards, but the presence of steady, secure standards, delivered without anxiety or punishment attached to them. I also want to talk about something that rarely gets addressed honestly in conversations like this, which is your own experience while you're doing all of this work. Because holding this kind of calm, accepting space for someone else's attachment wound is genuinely demanding. It requires you to regulate your own nervous system in real time, to sit with your own anxiety about his silence without letting that anxiety drive your behavior, to develop a level of internal security that most people spend years building in therapy, and to do all of this while also being a full human being with your own needs, your own bad days, your own moments of doubt and exhaustion. This is not easy. I don't want to pretend it is, because pretending it's easy sets you up to feel like a failure the moment you have a night where you do send the anxious text, or you do ask the question you told yourself you wouldn't ask, or you do feel the panic rise up despite everything you know intellectually about what's happening. Those moments don't erase the progress you've made. They're simply part of being human while doing genuinely difficult emotional work. Give yourself the same grace you're extending to him. That grace matters just as much. Let's also talk about timing, because when this actually works, it's not usually in the middle of a conflict or in the heat of his withdrawal. It's in the quiet aftermath, the moment after he's pulled away and come back on his own, when he's tentatively testing whether the space is still safe. This is when your steadiness matters most. Not during the retreat itself, when he genuinely needs the space, and any response from you, even a calm one, can feel like pressure simply by existing. The real moment is afterward, in the re-entry, when he's checking, consciously or not, whether he's going to be met with resentment for having needed the space in the first place, or whether he's going to be met with the same warmth that was there before he pulled away. That moment of re-entry is where the work you've done either gets reinforced or undone. Handle it with steadiness, and you build trust. Handle it with residual coldness or unspoken resentment, even if you never say it out loud, because he will feel it anyway, and you undo a piece of what you've been building. I want to bring this back now to the bigger picture, because I think it's important to zoom out before we close. An avoidant man doesn't melt because someone finally says the perfect thing or performs the perfect level of patience according to some formula. He softens gradually, sometimes imperceptibly at first, when he experiences repeated lived proof that he can be exactly who he currently is. Imperfect, sometimes distant, sometimes struggling to express what he feels, without that costing him the relationship. That proof can't be faked, and it can't be rushed. It has to be real, which means it has to come from someone who has done enough of their own work to offer that acceptance without quietly resenting him for needing it, and without abandoning their own needs in the process of offering it. If you're in this situation right now, loving someone who pulls away, wondering if there's a magic phrase or a perfect strategy that will finally get through to him, I want you to release yourself from that search. There isn't a single sentence that does this. There's a way of being consistent, warm, secure in yourself, honest about your own needs without weaponizing them, that slowly, over time, teaches someone that the thing they've spent their whole life protecting themselves from, being fully known and still fully accepted, is actually possible. Some men will meet you there, some won't, no matter how much safety you offer, because their fear runs deeper than any one relationship can resolve on its own. But if you can build that steadiness for yourself first, not as a strategy to change him, but as a genuine way of living that serves you regardless of his response, you'll find that you're no longer performing patience you don't actually have. You're simply living from a place secure enough that his retreats stop feeling like emergencies and his returns stop feeling like something you have to earn back. And whether or not that's what finally melts him, it will absolutely be what keeps you whole while you find out.